Ladies and gentlemen, beloved, hear me loud and clear. God wanted them to hurt you. Now, before you let that settle wrong in your spirit, let me explain something that might just shift your entire perspective. You see, you've been asking God why. You've been lying awake at night, replaying the betrayal, the rejection, the slander, the abandonment. You've been wondering, why did they treat me like that? Why did they walk away? Why did they hurt me? But what if I told you God allowed it because he had a bigger purpose? Let me take a moment to speak straight to the heart of someone who's been confusing their pain with punishment. You've been walking through seasons of hardship, seasons where nothing seems to go right, where doors are slamming, relationships are breaking, health is failing, finances are crumbling, and every step forward feels like 2 steps back. You've been lying awake at night wondering, God, what did I do wrong? You're convinced that somehow you've angered heaven, that you're under some divine penalty, that maybe you're being punished for something you said, something you did, something you failed to be. But hear me, pain is not punishment, it's position. You see, the enemy wants you to believe that every tear you've cried, every trial you've endured, every hurt you've experienced is evidence that you're out of favor, that God has turned his face from you. But the truth is, God never wastes pain. What feels like punishment is often preparation. What feels like rejection is often redirection. What feels like loss is often God's way of clearing space for what he's about to bring into your life. You thought the closed door was a curse, but what if it was actually protection? You thought the setback was a signal of failure, but what if it was God repositioning you for a greater comeback? You've been interpreting the silence of God as distance, but what if it's the stillness before the shift? Sometimes God has to disturb your comfort to deliver your calling. Sometimes he'll let situations shake you, not to punish you, but to pull you into alignment with something bigger, something deeper, something beyond what you can see right now. He knows that left to your own devices, you'd stay stuck in what's familiar. You'd settle for good enough. But there are some heights you'll never reach until you've been pushed. Some doors you'll never walk through until you've been locked out of others. Some blessings you'll never recognize until you've learned how to survive the storm. Think about the eagle. When it's time for the baby eagle to fly, the mother begins to stir the nest. She removes the soft feathers, the padding, making it uncomfortable. She does this not to harm the baby eagle, but because she knows it was never meant to stay in the nest. Comfort can keep you grounded when God designed you to soar. So, she disturbs what was once cozy to force the eagle to spread its wings. It's not punishment, it's positioning. That pain you're feeling is pushing you toward purpose. That betrayal is breaking you free from attachments that couldn't go where God is leading you. That heartbreak is hollowing out space inside you so that something greater can be poured in. You don't grow on the mountaintop, you grow in the valley. You don't gain strength when everything is easy. Strength is forged in the fire. What's uncomfortable is often necessary. What's painful is often purposeful. God knows how to take what the enemy meant to harm you and flip it, twist it, turn it into the very thing that elevates you. The shifting feels like shaking, but he's only moving you into position. The breaking feels brutal, but he's molding you into something unshakable. The delay feels like denial, but it's only because the timing has to match your destiny. You are not being punished, you are being positioned. Betrayal cuts deep. It's one thing to be hurt by an enemy, but it's something entirely different when the wound comes from someone you trusted, someone you let close, someone you loved. The sting of betrayal carries a unique pain because it's unexpected. It comes from within your circle, from the very people you thought would cover you, protect you, stand beside you. You replay the conversations, the memories, the loyalty you offered, and you can't help but ask, how could they do this to me? But what if I told you the betrayal was a blessing in disguise? What if that knife in your back wasn't meant to kill you, but to carve away what couldn't stay attached to your future? What if the person who walked away had to leave because their presence would have polluted the next season of your life? What if the heartbreak wasn't meant to destroy you, but to free you? It's hard to see it in the moment. It's hard to look past the hurt, the disappointment, the sleepless nights, the heavy heart. But time and perspective will reveal what you couldn't recognize when the wound was fresh. Betrayal is often the tool God uses to shift you into your destiny. Think about it. It wasn't the crowd that crucified Jesus. It was Judas who handed him over. Without Judas, there's no cross. Without the cross, there's no resurrection. The betrayal had to happen to fulfill the purpose. The one who smiled in his face and sold him out was playing a role in the divine script. You may not realize it, but there are people in your life right now whose betrayal was orchestrated. It wasn't a mistake, it wasn't random, it wasn't overlooked by God. They were allowed to get close, allowed to wound you, allowed to exit, because God knew you wouldn't leave the place you were in unless something forced you out. Some of you have been praying for elevation, for new doors, for new levels, but you didn't know that the doorway was going to be opened by disappointment. You didn't realize that the bridge to your blessing was built out of broken trust. You didn't expect that the very people you thought would go with you were actually the ones blocking the way. It feels like betrayal, but it's a blessing in disguise. It's a severing of ties that needed to be cut. It's a shaking loose of dead weight you didn't know you were carrying. It's a pruning that hurts in the moment, but makes way for fresh growth. God knows what you couldn't see, that if certain people stayed connected to you, they'd choke out the very purpose He planted inside you. He knows that some connections have expiration dates, and when their time is up, He'll allow circumstances to force the separation. Betrayal teaches you to depend not on people, but on purpose. It teaches you to stop placing your identity in who validates you, who supports you, who stays loyal. It teaches you that your assignment isn't tied to who applauds you, it's tied to who called you. The betrayal felt like rejection, but in reality, it was a divine release. A release from attachments that were holding you back. A release from circles that could no longer contain you. A release from familiar places so you could step into unfamiliar blessings. You may have lost people, but you didn't lose purpose. You may have been stabbed in the back, but God has still secured your future. The betrayal didn't derail His plan. It exposed what needed to be removed so the plan could move forward. It's easy to question why certain people are against you, why they talk about you behind closed doors, why they plot, scheme, criticize, undermine. You wonder why you keep facing resistance, why opposition seems to find you, why certain individuals seem determined to see you fail. It can feel like a personal attack, like the enemy is out to break you, to block you, to keep you bound. And in your frustration, you might even ask God, why? Why are these enemies in my life? But what if I told you your enemies are part of God's plan? What if I told you the very ones trying to tear you down are actually being used to build you up? That every weapon formed against you has a purpose greater than the pain it causes? That their schemes, their slander, their sabotage are all under divine control? You see, God is not surprised by your enemies. He is not caught off guard by their attacks. He is not pacing heaven wondering how to fix what they've tried to destroy. From the beginning of time, God factored your enemies into His design. He calculated the betrayal, the jealousy, the gossip, the plots. Not only did He allow them, but He plans to use them. Think about it. David doesn't become king without Goliath. Without an enemy standing in front of him, David doesn't step into his destiny. Goliath was necessary. It wasn't just about the victory, it was about the visibility. God used the enemy to put David on the platform. Some of you are fighting enemies right now, and you think their presence is proof that you're off track. You think the opposition means you're going in the wrong direction. But what if it's the opposite? What if their resistance is confirmation that you're right where God wants you to be? No enemy rises without permission, and if God allowed them to rise, He plans to use them to reveal something in you. Sometimes enemies do more to push you toward purpose than friends ever could. Friends will comfort you, but enemies will challenge you. Friends may affirm you, but enemies will activate something in you. The enemy's attack forces you to dig deeper, to pray harder, to rise higher. Without their opposition, you wouldn't tap into the strength, the resilience, the boldness God placed inside you. Your enemies are unknowingly working for God's agenda. Every lie they spread, every door they try to close, every plot they scheme, all of it will serve a purpose. Pharaoh thought he had power over Moses, but Pharaoh's stubbornness set the stage for God to show his power. The Red Sea didn't part until the enemy was chasing. God used Pharaoh's pursuit to display his glory. Your enemies will push you right into your miracle. They will chase you right into your breakthrough. They will try to trap you, only to watch God make a way where there was no way. Not only are they part of the plan, they're necessary for the plan. God is strategic. He's precise. He knows how to let your enemies build the platform for your promotion. He knows how to make them the footstool beneath your feet. The very ones trying to stop you will end up watching you rise. Their opposition doesn't cancel God's purpose. It confirms it. Their resistance doesn't block your blessing. It ushers it in. Their hatred doesn't derail your destiny. It highlights it. Brokenness is something most people try to avoid. We live in a world that glorifies strength, perfection, self-sufficiency. Society tells you to hide your cracks, to cover your scars, to present yourself polished, put together, unshaken. But life, if you live it long enough, has a way of breaking you anyway. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't knock politely. It comes in swinging through loss, betrayal, failure, disappointment, sickness, rejection, and suddenly what once felt whole now feels shattered. It's in those moments when everything feels like it's falling apart, when the weight of what you're carrying is too much, that you begin to question if you'll ever be whole again. But here's what I came to tell you. Brokenness is not the end. Brokenness is the beginning. Brokenness is the birthplace of breakthrough. You see, nothing truly powerful comes without breaking. A seed has to be broken open for a tree to grow. The soil has to be disturbed for the harvest to come. Even the alabaster box had to be broken before the fragrance could fill the room. The breaking releases what's been trapped inside. Sometimes God allows the breaking because there's something inside of you that can't come forth any other way. The potential, the calling, the oil, that anointing doesn't flow while everything is perfect and tidy. It flows from broken vessels. Some of you have been trying to hold it all together, afraid of the cracks showing, terrified of falling apart. But God's not interested in your presentation. He's interested in your transformation. He knows that your breakthrough doesn't come when you're pretending to be. It comes when you finally surrender, when you admit, God, I'm broken. I can't fix this. I need you. There's something powerful about brokenness because it brings you face to face with your own limitations. It strips away the illusion of control. It humbles you. It empties you. And it's in that empty place that God begins to pour. It's in that humbled state that He begins to rebuild. You've been looking at the shattered pieces of your life, thinking it's over, thinking it's too far gone, but God is the master potter. He specializes in broken things. He doesn't discard what's cracked. He doesn't throw away what's been damaged. No, He takes the fragments and starts shaping something new, something stronger, something more beautiful than before. The breakthrough doesn't come despite the breaking, it comes through it. Your tears have watered the soil of your next season. Your struggles have softened the ground for new growth. The very thing you thought disqualified you is the thing God will use to elevate you. Because people aren't moved by perfection, they're moved by authenticity. They're moved by resilience. They're moved when they see someone rise from the ashes, when they see beauty come out of brokenness. Even Jesus, before He fed the multitude, took the bread and broke it. It wasn't multiplied whole, it was multiplied broken. What he broke, he blessed, and what he blessed, he used to satisfy thousands. Your life may feel fragmented right now. Your heart may feel fractured. But don't despise the breaking. Don't curse the season where everything feels undone. That breaking is loosening things that needed to fall away. It's detaching you from what no longer serves your purpose. It's preparing the ground for something miraculous. Hurt has a way of making you feel like you've been buried. Like life has thrown dirt over your dreams, over your hope, over your future. When people lie on you, walk away from you, betray you, it can feel like you've been pushed down so far that you'll never rise again. You start to question if the pain has sidelined your purpose, if the wounds have disqualified you, if the hurt you've endured has somehow canceled what God spoke over your life. But I came to tell you, God will use the hurt to elevate you. The very thing the enemy meant to bury you, it's the same thing God will use to build you. The dirt wasn't meant to suffocate you. It was meant to cultivate you. You are not being buried. You are being planted. And when God plants something, he intends for it to grow, to rise, to bear fruit in due season. It's in the hurt that humility is born. It's in the hurt that character is shaped. It's in the hurt that pride is stripped away and dependence on God is formed. And it's that kind of foundation God looks for when he's ready to elevate someone. Because elevation without preparation leads to destruction. God won't elevate what hasn't been refined. Some of you have been through seasons of hurt so deep, it felt like it broke you beyond repair. But every tear you cried, every sleepless night, every whispered prayer you didn't think anyone heard, he saw it. He collected every tear. And he's the kind of God who doesn't let pain go unused. You thought the betrayal was the end, but it was the setup. You thought the loss would take you out, but it positioned you for more. You thought their rejection meant you had no value, but God saw something in you even they couldn't recognize. What they tried to tear down, God is about to lift up. What they overlooked, God is about to showcase. Think about Joseph. Sold by his own brothers, thrown into a pit, falsely accused, forgotten in prison, hurt after hurt, blow after blow. But at every step, God was orchestrating something higher. The pit didn't stop his purpose. It prepared him for the palace. The betrayal didn't break him, it built him for leadership. The hurt wasn't wasted, it was woven into the very fabric of his elevation. God knows how to take the pain you've endured and turn it into the platform you stand on. People will look at your elevation and think it came easy, but they won't know the private hell you survived. They'll see the crown, but won't know the crushing. They'll see the favor, but won't understand the fire you walked through to carry it. Elevation doesn't come without opposition. You can't rise without resistance. The hurt was necessary because it refined you, strengthened you, shaped you into someone who can handle the weight of where God is taking you. You've been asking why. Why did they hurt me? Why did I have to go through this? Why did they leave me like that? But what if the why is because God knew you'd survive it? God knew you'd come out better, wiser, strong. God knew the very people who tried to hurt you would have to watch him lift you. He's the God who prepares a table in the presence of your enemies, not away from them, in their presence. The same ones who doubted you will see you elevated. The same ones who tried to break you will witness your breakthrough. Rejection stings. There's something about being overlooked, left out, pushed aside that cuts deep into the core of who you are. Whether it was a friend who walked away, a door that slammed in your face, an opportunity that slipped through your fingers, or a person who didn't see your worth. It all leaves you questioning your value, questioning your place, questioning if you're enough. You start to think, maybe I wasn't qualified, maybe I wasn't worthy, maybe I'll never be chosen. But what if I told you that their rejection was divine redirection? What if the very people who dismissed you, who told you no, who shut you out, were actually playing right into God's hands? What if their rejection was not a reflection of your lack, but a reflection of God's plan? See, we often think rejection is the end. We treat it like a wall, a stop sign, a dead end. But with God, rejection is never the end. It's the detour. It's the reroute. It's God saying, not here, not now, not like this. I've got something better, something higher, something more aligned with who I've called you to be. Some of you have been mourning over doors that closed, people who left, circles that excluded you. You've been replaying the conversations, the silence, the missed calls, wondering why they didn't choose you, why they didn't see you, why they didn't support you. But can I tell you something? They couldn't see the fullness of what's inside of you because they weren't meant to steward it. Their no wasn't punishment, it was protection. Sometimes God will let people reject you because He knows if you stayed connected to them, they would limit you. He knows certain environments are too small to contain what He's put inside you. He knows some relationships would drain you dry before you ever stepped into destiny. So rather than letting you stay comfortable, He allows rejection to reroute you toward the place He designed for you all along. Think about it. If the people you were counting on hadn't turned their backs, you'd still be leaning on them. If the job you wanted hadn't passed you over, you'd still be settling for less than you deserve. If the door had opened too soon, you'd have walked through unprepared. But God is strategic. His redirection is disguised as rejection because He's moving you away from the counterfeit and guiding you toward the authentic. Even Jesus faced rejection. He was despised, misunderstood, dismissed by the very people He came to save. But none of that rejection stopped His mission. It rerouted Him to the cross, to the ultimate purpose, to the assignment that would change everything. You might not understand it now, but one day you'll look back and realize if they hadn't walked away, you wouldn't have walked forward. If they had accepted you, you might have stayed stagnant. Their rejection pushed you into isolation, but it was in that isolation that you discovered identity. It was in that silence that you heard God's voice more clearly. It was in their absence that you realized God's presence was enough. What you thought was a detour was actually divine direction. What felt like being pushed out was really God pulling you into position, because when one door closes, it's only so the right one can open. When one person says no, it's so you don't settle short of what's destined for you. God uses rejection to recalibrate your focus, to shift your steps, to realign your path. He removes attachments, closes chapters, and blocks access. Not because you're not worthy, but because you're called to something greater. You've been through the betrayal. You've walked through the rejection. You've stood face to face with enemies, felt the weight of brokenness, endured hurt that shook you to your core. But here's what I need you to understand. None of it was wasted. None of it caught God off guard. Every ounce of pain, every setback, every closed door, every person who walked away, it all served a purpose far greater than you could see in the moment. God didn't allow it to break you. He allowed it to build you. He used the betrayal to reveal who was never meant to go with you. He used the hurt to elevate you. He used the rejection to redirect you. He used the brokenness as the birthplace for your breakthrough. The very people who tried to hurt you were tools in the hand of a God who knew exactly how to turn their weapons into stepping stones. Their rejection didn't define you, it refined you. Their betrayal didn't stop you, it set you up. Their schemes didn't derail your destiny, they drove you straight into it. You thought it was the enemy, but it was strategy. You thought it was the end, but it was the entrance. God used every bit of it to carve you into who you were always meant to be. Now it's time to stop mourning what you lost and start moving toward what's next. You're not broken, you're built. You're not rejected, you're redirected. You're not defeated, you're destined. This is your moment to rise, to walk boldly, to step into the purpose God has prepared for you, not in spite of the hurt, but because of it.